Summer Session number 12. We'll begin our first mindful minute by tuning into this present moment, taking a few calming breaths, letting the breath become calmer by releasing any tension you find around it, becoming aware of any sensations you're feeling in the body right now, and settling into a nice, stable, balanced posture that's also nice and soft and malleable, like a lump of soft clay. You can become aware of any sights and sounds, tastes or smells happening right now in this moment, and the feeling of paper under your hands. And become aware of your intentions of what you'd like to create today. Maybe give a little wiggle to the fingers and some wrist circles before we move on to the art part. Today's little warm-up doodle looks fairly simple, but this repeating sort of curvy wave pattern can be a good opportunity to practice thick to thin lines. If you sort of lighten up when you're on the inside or that little small part that's going down. And now, before moving on to this design, I should just mention that this is going to be a very different looking one to follow at home if you don't have the underlying design like I do here. I'm just starting by coloring in a sort of gradient. I'm doing it very loosely, and I'm not going to worry too much if I go outside these little lines a little bit, because afterwards I'm going to go over those with some marker. I've tried to make the sort of repeating part of the design a little bit more obvious in the little decal that I put up on the side there to help you as a guide. But again, it's a fairly complex design, so if you are following at home, I would recommend keeping these swirls that you do kind of loose. And maybe instead of starting the way I am, where I'm making this color gradient, you can try and trace the repeating pattern by first maybe doing a 6-pointed star with 3 lines. You can sort of see that in the middle there, and that's going to be the basis for the design. And then the part that repeats with these swirls, the easiest way to kind of see that as one chunk is to look at the one little curve that's going the reverse direction from everything else at the very edge of this design. There's one swirl that's going, I guess, clockwise, where everything else is going counter to that. So you could start by doing 3 big swirls on each of the 6 points of your star that get bigger and bigger as they go to the edge. And then at the end of the biggest, there's a little reverse curve coming off that. And then there's just 2 sort of smaller curves behind that. And then your 3 big main curves repeat again. And you can do that just loosely with some pencil, and try not to worry too much about making them too perfect or repeating. Again, this is going to look a bit more exacting, or I don't want to say nicer, because you might create something even nicer if you're being loose and sketchy, and that has its own niceness and funness. But what I do here is going to look like it had a underlying design, because it does, and that definitely changes the end product and kind of changes what I'm able to do, which is why I made this book with these little designs that I can follow, because having something already down on the page does help to give me something to start with, and it just makes it easier to do a little bit of creative work every day. I think sometimes we get caught up in the idea that being creative has to start with a completely blank page, and that's not necessarily true. You can definitely take something that's there and change it and pull different things out, push it in different directions, and that's its own type of creation as well. But having just a little bit of the planning part taken away can take some of the pressure off. So it's just one thing to consider about this sort of creative journaling exercise, that having some light guides set up can help you to just come to the page and start doodling every day. Because some days you'll have more energy and more time than others. That's just life. So it can become another side to your journal when I look back and I see there are some designs that have been colored in more delicately and intricately than others. It definitely tells me I had more time that day. Sometimes my writing gets a little bit further apart, and that's also another indicator that I didn't have as much time that day, so I was writing in bigger, more spaced out letters to try and fill a page. And that's fine. Sometimes I just write bullet points because I'm not a strict bullet point journaler. I don't use any one particular style all the time. I like to keep that open and fluid. Sort of like these fluid, wavy, seaweedy looking curves making up this design. Some are gonna be big and some are gonna be smaller. That's just how the journaling goes. But again, having these designs set up does allow you different things. So one of the things I like using this for is doing this sort of gradient coloring, where you start with a light color and just work your way out. And a really simple palette you can choose is to just take part of the rainbow, like I did here, from one primary color, like yellow, to another, like blue, and just color in between. You can even do that with two primary colors that blend really well, but I'm trying to keep this very light and sketchy today because these whirls and loops are, again, very intricate. So I just wanted to keep things loose and sketchy, and even though I'm coloring furiously and not very exactly here, having that design underneath as a guide is helping me do that very quickly. If you're following along without the guide, though, you could try doing this in more of a gradient, in the sense of doing all the inner loops in one color and then building loops on top of that. But that will end up looking a little bit different, and again, you might want to temper your expectations if you're not following a guide, because it will be harder. So now that I've got that gradient colored in, I'm doing just tracing over these lines, and it helps with these shapes to look at the shape of the negative space. And I'm going to make some mistakes, as you'll see, but I'm just kind of looking at that overall shape that's made by these whirls and loops and following along. I'm working from the inside to the outside again, because that will be a little bit easier, and also if you are following along at home, that will be the easiest way to do this as well, is to go from inside to outside. But again, without that guide underneath, it will be harder, and you might want to temper your expectations for how it will end up looking, because it is quite a complex design, which you could simplify a little bit by not trying to get the effect of having outlines and negative space, and just going for drawing in those lines. Now I've run out of sand, as usual, so I'm going to speed things up to get the rest of this in to our video today. But this would be a very fun design to come back to on work breaks and just keep following one particular line until it's done. Now for our second mindful minute, we can just straighten back up and see where the breath has gotten to in that time that we were doodling. Release any tension around the breath that might have collected. See if maybe one of the shoulders is now a little off kilter, going towards the page, and straightening it back out, letting the posture become nice and stable but balanced again, and also soft and malleable. Feeling the seat underneath us and the paper under our hands, and also becoming aware of any sights or sounds or tastes or smells, as well as feelings happening in this present moment. Maybe there's a feeling that you want to do a little stretch before we start writing. For today's writing prompt, you're going to write whatever comes to mind about the sunniest day you enjoyed this summer. And as usual, I like to pull out some keywords, which obviously summer has to be one. So I'm going to use a nice light blue. I'm using blues and yellows to mimic my design down in the corner a bit up here. And of course the yellow has to be used for sunniest day. Another thing these light guides are very helpful for is with this kind of varsity letter style font, you can just fill them in with some marker or pencil or whatever instead of worrying about the outline. But you can also do the outline on the keywords alone and just do a sort of serif style font following the sort of inside track if you'd like to do that, because writing everything out in the varsity letters will take a bit more time. You can also try following them in a bit more of a bold marker, because then it'll fill in a nice line, thick line as you go. Trying to lift off a little bit on those serifs, so those little lines that trail off of the main letter lines. If you do those just a little bit lighter, they'll add some thick and thin to your lines. And of course, as we're doing this, we're going to let our mind wander over this idea, thinking back to sunny days we've enjoyed this summer. Thinking about which one was sunniest. And that is open to some interpretation. You could try and think of the absolute most sunny day by light measurements. But I think it would be fun to interpret this question as the sunniest day you enjoyed. So maybe thinking about, what day did you enjoy the sun the most? Maybe it was only out for a few minutes and it was actually quite a cloudy and rainy day, but you actually enjoyed the sun for a few moments while it was out. Or maybe it was a nice sunny day all day long, but it was the one that you enjoyed the most out of perhaps many sunny days that you got to enjoy this summer, which I hope very much is the case. The day that I think I'm going to pull out is one that I enjoyed at a music festival where I spent the day by the poolside with some music, some new friends and old friends, and just had a very lovely day in the sun, doing some yoga and dancing and swimming around, floating around probably more accurately. And the style I'm kind of going in is I'm going to try and write a very loose poem here. Not worrying too much about making the rhymes perfect or the cadence perfect either. That would require some editing and some more thought. This, I'm just going to go straight ahead and try and just fill in whatever I can remember with some loose rhyming at the end. Of course, I'll read it so that you can get the full effect, but once it's done. If you're also going to try out this loose poem style, I invite you to release any perfectionist tendencies to try and make every rhyme line up. And just kind of see what happens with the rhymes and the things that you're trying to write about. Our journals can be a great place for first drafts of things. So if I wanted to turn this into a good poem, then I'd have to go back and do some editing. But that's not what this is right now. This is not the time for editing. This is the time to get ideas down on the page. This is the time to just create without worrying about what the end product is going to look like. And just keep things loose, maybe a little bit sketchy. even though we're not doodling anymore. Keeping the writing flow sketchy and loose. And just trying to sketch out a picture of a lovely day with your words. And enjoying any silly rhymes that are only near rhymes, maybe. Near rhymes are very much allowed here. If you start running out of ideas from the actual memory itself, you can always wander into the future and think about how you might recreate this day next season, or maybe even into the fantastical and imagine scenarios where that day could be done in some different weird, cool setting, like on a pirate ship or in a magical realm. I don't know. Or you can even wander away from the sunny day part of it and think about what happened that night. Even though it's not about the sunniest part of the day anymore, it's still part of the day and that time. So we don't have to be rigid in what we think about putting down for this day. But since we're getting towards the end of the timer, I'm going to read this out since I don't know how well you can read my chicken scratch on the screen. So what I ended up with here was, little black rabbits camping in Quebec. I danced all night till my feet were wrecked. By daytime music was playing by the pool. It was oh so hot and oh so cool. I turned myself into a pretzel on the grass, then rinsed off my sweat and danced off my ass. Finally made it to the water for swims and chats. So many good times with so many cool cats. Fried up grilled cheeses and made some tea. Tried to dry off, but then it was rainy. Just another quick shower before the sun came back out, but enough to make my bikini hard to dry out. Then the little black rabbits danced all night again. The sun came up, and we slept in tents. Drove back along the river with a new friend. There'll be another day for dancing around the bend. Like I said, lots of near rhymes in there. Now for our final little mindful minute. We'll just tune back into the breath. See if it's sped up or got excited while we were writing, or if maybe it got a little more slow and relaxed. And just make sure there's no tension that's crept up anywhere, either in the shoulders or arms, or even in the legs. That can happen if we're sort of going towards our writing hand. It can build up in the hips, those muscles that pull us forward while we're sitting. So we'll just release that tension and let our posture become nice and stable but soft. And become aware of anything happening in this moment. Any sights, sounds, tastes, smells, feelings. Become aware of your intentions of what you want to create. And maybe do one little final preparatory stretch before we get going. So for the crafting part, you can look at if there are any colors you want to pull out from what you wrote and doodled. I have my 3-color scheme that I've pulled some opaque tapes for, and some papers and stickers that go along with that. But you can also think of themes from a more wordy point of view, like pulling out maybe some things that are sunny to mimic the writing prompt of enjoying a sunny day. I tried to grab some flowers that have that sort of. And you can think of how you want to arrange these things. Start playing around with that, trying them in different positions. Maybe thinking of whether there's some function you want stuff to perform, like whether you want things to overlap, or maybe create some hidden areas for more writing, or create frames around some of the stuff that you wrote. I want to use this door as a door, as I often like to do with these little cardboard doors. So I'm going to just tape in the other parts of this that I want to be overlapping on that. I've been very much enjoying using stickers and keeping the backs on them, as I've done with this little butterfly and flower, because then they add some depth and overlap, but I can still lift the whole thing off the page, which will give me some more room for writing behind here, should I want to use that. I also like creating some loose frames around the writing with some of these decorative tapes. You usually start with the prettier tapes, but the ones that are less sticky. So any stickier tapes you have, you can use to layer over top of less sticky ones, and that'll keep them stuck down. But of course, you can also use just some plain clear tape to stick down those edges. Since some washi tapes can be a lot more sticky than others. Or you can overlap stickers on the ends, and that will keep things stuck down nicely. I had thought about putting a sticker up there that has some writing, but I didn't leave myself enough room, so I think this will make a fun little surprise sticker on the back of this, which is another thing you can use overlap, or what I keep calling doors, but what are essentially areas that aren't completely stuck down that you still can look at, kind of like creating another page inside the page. It could be used for extra writing, but also more decoration. The main thing I think with crafting is to think of how the overlapping elements are going to add some depth to your picture. And sometimes you can kind of create things that interact with each other a little bit. So another kind of silly idea I had for this was to create a sun actually on the page with some tape and a sticker that has a sort of sun face in the center of it. And to do that, I'm just going to use the tape and sticker and stick down some sun rays with this yellow tape that I have. Nice thing about these tapes is you can use them to color or add color to a piece, but you can also use them to add straight lines very easily. No ruler needed. So now I'm going to just gently lift the sticker out from under everything, trying to keep those tapes where they are and then stick them back down a little bit. And then place that sticker back in the center of them. I wasn't trying too hard to make these all very exacting, so keeping things loose and a little bit sketchy, even on the crafting side, can help to keep this fun and less bogged down by persnickety perfectionism. Add some green on this side to mimic those greens that I put into the seaweed swirls mandala there. I think I'll use some yellow hinges to keep this nice and sunny and bright. Even though I've left myself a lot of room here, kind of want some of the little sticker things to overlap I wanted this one by the butterfly, so I stuck it behind there. And of course, I ran out of time. There's a lot that did get done in 10 minutes, but for the last couple minutes here, I'm going to speed things up while I add some of my green tapes behind here, just to add a little bit more decoration. Almost like an area of grass that the sun's shining on. And this last sticker for a little overlapping flower hidden behind that page. There we go. I'm happy with that. I hope you created something that you're equally happy with. And I hope that until we do another session together, you have many relaxing, fun sessions creating nice things in your journal. The music, as always, was gotten from the lovely Lofi girl and is on the playlist Lo-Fi's to Live By's if you want to keep listening to this stuff during your other sessions. Thank you so much for watching.